begin shortly.
Call the meeting to order.
Sean Lucas,
Yes.
Justin Orff,
Here.
Jared Giddens,
Here.
Aaron Peterson,
Here.
Darlene Graham,
Here.
Amy Hookstrat.
Here.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. We will move on to the consent agenda. Would anyone like to remove any items from the consent agenda? Nope. Seeing none, I'll accept a motion to approve.
So made.
Second. Roll call, please.
Justin Orff,
Yes.
Jared Giddens,
Yes.
Aaron Peterson,
Yes.
Darlene Graham,
Yes.
Amy Hookstrat,
Yes.
Sean Lucas.
Yes. And we'll move on to the visitor section. Do you have anyone for the visitor section, Cindy?
I do, Mayor. Tonight we have Ron Sanders.
Mr. Sanders.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ron Sanders. I live at 976 Glen Oaks Drive here in Nixa. Wanted to come up here and talk a little bit about something on the agenda. At the end, there's an open discussion about changing something in the home charter. And seems like the part of the home charter that hasn't been used before, and I'm one of the people that's using it now, now has threatened some people's power and has shown a light on the people's power to come back and address grievances to the city council. And now that threatens, the people in power, we got to change that, right? All of a sudden, things look a little bit different. When I'm looking at it, the first thing I can say is, well, believe it or not, I voted for you at the last election. You were the only person on the ballot. Didn't know very much about you, didn't know very much about, what was going on in our community and everything, and we weren't dealing with, everything that's happened since. If you feel threatened, if there is an issue with, maintaining the power of your seat, then the appropriate action or reaction would be to get out there and get your constituents to vote for you en masse. If you really want to secure your seat, have somebody run against you so that you have to get 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 votes. If you really want to secure your seat, get out there and get the citizens interested in what you're doing here, and ask them, compel them, lead them to the polls. There's 22,000 people here. If you had 10,000 of them vote for you, nobody'd be able to touch you, any one of y'all. But now you're sitting where the majority of you could be recalled with 10 or 12 signatures, and that's a threat. It's a serious threat to your power. It's a serious threat to the structure of our community. And it all started at the polls the day that you were elected. Not the day that the committee formed, not the day that we collected signatures, not because the home charter has those standards set. It's because you failed to get a large quantity of voters, a large portion of your voting constituents out to the polls to vote for you. That's where your power comes from. That's where your power lies. And that's where your power should continue to come from and continue to thrive should you get out there and get the people to come to the polls and vote. Not changing the rules because you feel threatened. That's weak. That is weak. So get people to the polls, get them to vote for you. You know, secure your position on the city council, in your position, with the votes of the people, not with maneuvers and changing the doctrine that creates the structure of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. I agree wholeheartedly. They've tried for years and years to get more people to come out to vote for municipal elections. It's always been a challenge. Who do you have next?
We have Jeff Belcher is up tonight.
Okay, I did pay attention to the rules. I'm sorry, I'm Jeff Belcher, 203 South Allen, Nixa, Missouri. I missed the last couple of meetings. I finally got the COVID. Took it 18 months to catch me, but it finally did. I feel great. I had a little scare coming in. They thought I had a fever. I was on the internet Sunday night, and I thought I'd click on the city council papers schedule up there. And it seems that members of council have asked about proposing changes to the Nixa's home charter rule. Does anybody care to raise their hand to indicate support? So that was incorrectly stated when members was a typo, I guess. It was just one.
Well, I mean,
don't know.
I believe there were several.
yeah.
Mr. Belcher.
Okay, so we're back to the hiding behind our anonymity again. Okay, again, 2 weeks in quarantine, 10 days, whatever it was. Caught it on a weekend, so I took a few extra days just to be safe. I had time to do some research. I'm not a volunteer. I have a full-time job, so my days are busy. Seems like most of your comments are regarding how anti-mask we are. And I would ask you to educate yourself. But this is not about anti-masking. This is about asking our city government to do things properly, the way it's spelled out in our home charter. And it's like Ron just said, when we did it word for word, dot for dot, T for T, I for I, exactly as it's spelled out by the law, you don't like it. So I'd say maybe this position isn't quite for you. The basis for this recall was basically the abuse of power, overreach of power, tyrannical behavior, however you want to call it. I know several of you have heard all this before, but for the new guys, we'll go over it again. First off, the mask mandate went against everybody on the city council. They voted unanimously against it. The people that chose to come up and speak were majority against it. The business owners that were polled by the Chamber of Commerce were 70% against it. And I know you state the numbers were great. They were in the beginning because Springfield was already under a mandate. We were collecting tons of revenue from Springfield, customers that didn't want to wear a mask. Our restaurants were thriving, our stores were thriving. If you look at the numbers, if you were present for the city council meetings, they gave a very eloquent presentation that showed them numbers spiking when Springfield was under a mandate. But once we hit our mandate numbers, they started coming back down. There's a reason for that. People don't want the mask mandate. So, partly mask, partly the procedure with which it was done. The mayor single-handedly chose which businesses would and would not remain open. Could have been put up for a vote. The mask mandate could have been put up for a vote. Could have waited a week, could have waited 2 weeks. Put the emergency order in for a month. Get your council together and vote on it as a whole, as you're expected to. Represent your people. Not listening to the voice of the people was part of the reason this recall was brought about. Or as, I guess as you call it in your comments on your responses there, we are detractors. It's a pretty big D word. I'm sure you know a lady named Hillary Clinton. She had a pretty big D word. It was called deplorables. How well did that work for her? Again, not listening to city council. City council said, no, we don't want this. We did it anyway. Kind of tyrannical behavior. And your comments also said city council agreed with this mandate. Well, I'd beg to differ. Again, had you attended city council, you would have seen him getting grilled and questioned and individually asked who supported this mandate. there were not unanimous consent supporting this mandate. There were people that had guts and had nerve and had the respect to answer the questions that their constituents are asking. However, there were a few that sat there and stared off blindly into space because I don't have to answer your questions. This isn't a Q&A session. Then, following all this, then we're going to move the speakers to the very end of the meeting so we can sit here till 10 or 10:30 at night while we go through all the city's other business before we get a chance to speak. Again, those are the actions of a tyrannical dictator. You couple this all together, do you see kind of a theme going? You know, and then personally, you know, I've seen some things, you want to vilify the daddy-daughter dance of all things. Really? I've worked around men my entire life, hundreds of men. I don't recall one of them being upset or their feelings hurt because they didn't get to dance with their mommy when they were in 3rd grade. I can't recall anyone. And again, I work with men. I'm in construction. There's not many women out there. There's more than there has been. But the majority of us been dealing with men. And I can't recall anybody saying, you know what, I really wished I could have danced with my mom when I was in 3rd grade. You know, and now, with more tyrannical acts, we want to go and change the democratically voted process which our home charter was written. Why? Because maybe the tides have turned. You use your rules, you use your ordinances, and now you were supportive initially. Said we were well within our rights and, you know, do what you got to do. And here we are. And we're complaining about the city and the money and all this and that. Well, you had plenty of opportunities. Every city council meeting, put it for a vote. Do it the right way. We told you we'd go away. Just do it the right way, procedurally, the way it's spelled out. And now we want to go change the way the rules are spelled out. Shame on you. And as far as these other comments, I'm not going to get into it because my time is obviously up. Calling us a dog and pony show for exercising our rights, it's pretty bold words for a very freshman incoming city councilman, councilwoman. I mean, those are big words. You want to get to calling names, that's fine. Remember, you drew the first straw. I've got a little anger, and I've got a little hostility, and I've got a little emotion going on, and this is just the beginning of it. I'm going to dig and expose you for what you are. And with that, I rest.
Thank you, Mr. Belcher. Glad that you're feeling better.
Thank you.
There's no more signed up.
We'll leave the visitor section open. If anyone else would like to speak, they can do so at this time. And we'll close the visitor section and move on to our service awards. We have 3 service awards this evening. We have Josh Enlow with the Water Department, 5 years. There's Josh. He's back there. Who are we going to let? Doug? Or? Somebody has to come up and say something nice about you first. Sit back and enjoy that. Yeah, make him.
Oh, I'm supposed
make
to
him
say
sweat a
something
little
nice
bit.
about him?
Make him sweat a little bit.
Josh has been with he's been with the city for 5 years. He started out the wastewater plant. We transferred him up to the collection system where he run the camera through the sewer systems for a year or so, and then we had an opening in the water side, and he decided to come over there. And what can I say? He's one of the best water people we've got. I mean, he's dependable. Don't take it that serious. I joke with him a lot because he graduated with my boy in high school, and they've been friends for 10 years, 15, something like that. He's a great kid, but don't invite him over to the house because you'll never run him off. I've tried for years. But honestly, I wished I had more like him because he's dependable and he's a hard worker, and when I tell him to do something, he gets the job done, and he gets it done quick and efficiently. So there you go, Josh.
Congratulations. We'll save them all and do all the pictures at the end. Is that okay, Drew? Where's Drew? Yeah, so Drew doesn't have to get up. All right. Our second award is to Assistant Parks Director, Katie Buford. 10 years with the park.
Right now. Well, what can we say about Katie? I think you've all had the pleasure of working with Katie. Katie's one of those that started with us very young as a part-timer working front desk and has just kind of worked her way up through the department. She's a very dependable and loyal employee. She is the one that is doing all of our back-end business stuff with all of our memberships, membership collections and things that way, does our membership and, our sponsorship and marketing as well. And so she's a very busy lady. It's a great thing that she's uber organized and keeps everything going, and is just one of those that is my right hand all the time, which is fantastic. She's also the leader of our think tank group, which has brought a lot of great ideas and things to the city as well. And so she's just a woman of many hats, and we greatly appreciate her within the department.
I don't see Debbie, but Debbie Snyder, 10 years with the courts.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. Debbie couldn't join us this evening, but Debbie is a court administrator for the Nixa Municipal Court. She's been with us for 10 years. She is the court system. She knows it inside and out. She's a great asset to the city. She's been on, we had a Show Me Court pilot program that she participated in, and currently she's sitting on a committee right now with virtual court procedures. So she's a great asset to this community. Thank you.
Congratulations. We will move on to our proclamation. The older I get, the worse my eyes are, and the harder these are to read. So, whereas the city of Nixa is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting our community, and whereas a sufficient blood supply is a public health issue both locally and nationally, and our hospitals and medical centers need a readily available supply for our residents and visitors, and whereas the Community Blood Center of the Ozarks is the sole supplier of blood and plasma to patients at 44 area healthcare facilities in Southwest Missouri, Northeast Arkansas, Southeast Kansas, and has been since 1995. And whereas the blood donation can help up to one blood donation can help up to 3 patients, and although an estimated 38% of the U.S. population is eligible to donate blood, less than 10% of the eligible donors actually do. If only 1% more of all Americans would give blood regularly, blood shortages would disappear for the foreseeable future. And whereas while COVID-19 vaccinations are in progress, the turnout at many area blood drives has still been negatively affected. And whereas blood transfusions are taking place at record levels, requiring 200 to 250 pints of blood to be collected every single day to keep up with the current hospital needs. And whereas the city of Nixa is committed to raising the awareness about the importance of blood donations, because giving blood is the greatest this you can do to greatest. I think there must be a typo in there somewhere. I'm gonna say greatest gift that you can do today, because it will make a difference tomorrow in the lives of your relatives, friends, and neighbors. Therefore, I, Brian Steele, Mayor for the City of Nixa, do hereby proclaim Thursday, August 19th, 2021, as Nixa versus Ozark Community Blood Drive Challenge Day. So we will be having a blood drive challenge against the City of Ozark, myself against Mayor Jackson, to see who can bring in the most pints of blood. We, of course, won last year and will, I'm sure, continue to win this year. So it'll take place in the afternoon at the Bridge Church. So anyone that would like to come and donate, we would love to see you out there. Get a T-shirt. I think we have a gift card from Central Bank that they'll have a drawing for whoever donates that day. So hope we get as many people out to donate as possible. All right, we will move on to our presentations. Show Me Christian County, Andrea.
update you each month. And, you know, hearing your report and proclamation, Mayor, I'm really not sure how other communities do it. You know, we're kind of infamous across the state and really across the nation for, you know, our Friday Night Light syndrome or our co-opetition. And I really don't know how other communities do it if we didn't have that every time around. So I always enjoy when we can funnel that in the appropriate ways. So to give you the brief update on our staff report from July, all in all, it was productive but efficient. I did take my vacation during July, so we did have a week loss of my productivity, but we still had our staff up and present. Project Life, I was able to get that information to you in real time because that happened the week that I presented to you last. So we completed that packet as a whole. It was 18 total pages between the 4 sites that we continued and moved forward with the local incentives package, and we submit it and wait to see if there is a response. Specific to Nixa, again, Project Eli, we are working on scheduling a debrief continuation with those owners on their projections. So they now have some site estimates, and that's really what we've been waiting on. So we can kind of reverse engineer their site cost to know what they may be able to do as far as their business model moving forward and help them with funding. So as we continue down, our staff is working with the county on a marketing initiative, doing that in cooperation with city staff here and Mr. Douglas, and then also Ms. Payne from Ozark as the PIOs, vetting bids and refining a scope of work and just seeing if that is an appropriate action to take when we really band together from a marketing perspective. So we are also working with the Southwest Missouri Council of Governments and their long-range recovery coordinator, Chris Kimke. So this is a program specifically funded by EDA funds through one of the rounds of COVID, and we are just acting as a facilitator and a convener. They approached our organization, and we are working with all the communities on an ARPA priority session, and just to make sure that we have all the voices at the same table. In addition, it's not in your report, but we will be bringing you more information. SIMCOG was successful in receiving a $1 million revolving loan fund, and so they have been working on getting the applications together, getting the loan committee together, and the software in order to run that. And that will be a regional program, so we will be able to have access to that for our entrepreneurs in Nixa and Christian County through SIMCOG as the vehicle and mechanism. In addition to funding, staying close to our lending facilities is definitely utmost priority, so we can make sure we get that into the hands of our lenders. I just wanted to note for you all that Jason England is now serving on our board. He is the new executive vice president for Arvest, and as you know, they only have one presence in Christian County, and that is in Nixa. So we are really looking forward to continuing that relationship. Mr. England came to us from Northwest Arkansas and spent a lot of time in the foundation work and really giving back to the community, and he has a heart to do so. So we're meeting on those priorities. We also met with the Nixa Fire District just to see what their preferences are in relation to development. We try to do the same thing with the Ozark Fire District as well, as that does relate to pre-development processes, and they've been great to come to the table. And then as far as additional marketing efforts, we did meet with the Missouri Partnership as they are working on some regional initiatives. As an example, they have recently partnered with the northwest corner of our state to launch a whole branding section called Missouri Northwest, and that's something that we may be exploring with them between either Springfield and Joplin or Springfield and Branson, something like that, to tie it all together. And my most exciting news to round it out, as I was disrupting your meeting, I was complimenting Katie and Matt on their training because Jen Torres started today as our administrative assistant. So Jen is a graduate of Nixa High School and spent 5 years with Nixa Parks and Rec, actually receiving the Customer Service Award from the city of Nixa here, and just recently came to me from Nixa Public Schools. So we're thrilled to have her. She is absolutely a joy, and I cannot wait for you all to meet her as well. Happy to answer any questions you may have, but that's the report as it relates to your community.
Any questions for Andrea? Thank you very much.
It's always my pleasure.
And then we will move on to the police department's scope of work. Mr. Albers.
Good evening, council members. I'm here tonight to present to you guys the Site Facility Improvement Addition and Cost Analysis for the City of Nixa. We had the opportunity, go ahead, next slide.
We have the opportunity to visit with Chief Campbell and Major Tennis to go over a number of potential site issues and opportunities for the building for the Nixa facility. The objectives we had was to look at the existing conditions of the site and building to identify some of the existing efficiencies, some of the missing or underutilized spaces or missing spaces. We also did a facility analysis to identify what kind of spaces they are using and what they need for the future or for current needs. We also took that information and made some recommendations for an existing facility interior remodel. And in addition to that, to try to determine what additional spaces they need, we needed to look at some building addition options. With that also, there was some different site improvements that we were looking at to provide for them, and then kind of cost comparing that to a new facility. Next slide, please. We did have the pleasure to sit down with Major Tennis and Chief Campbell to really analyze their existing conditions. You know, the police department itself is a great tool that helps, allows the police department to be much more efficient in the way that they do their day-to-day operations and for, you know, the response time and calls to the public. One of the main items that we've seen on the existing site is parking capacity. They have a lot of different issues there, not only for the storage of police cars and patrol cars to make sure that they are in a safe environment away from the public, can't be vandalized or things of that nature. They also have employees parking cars and where those go on the site in conjunction with the public cars. When you put all that together, we did an analysis to try to determine how many parking spots they really need and the deficiency that they may have. Another item was covered parking. There's right now, there's really not a way to house any patrol cars that would be away from the inclement weather. You can always imagine if there is an emergency call and a police officer needed to respond to that call in a quick manner and had to clean an inch of ice off their car, or had to travel to their parking spot with snow on the ground, or in the middle of a rainstorm. Right now, there's really not any facilities there to rectify those type of issues. Approach and safety concerns, we looked at those as well. Where do the officers park? How do they get to the building and not have any safety concerns of any perpetrators or someone that may be on site? Vehicular protection, I mentioned that a little bit earlier, especially with some of the things that go on in today's society. Protecting those vehicles and protecting the employees is very important. Exterior fence was another pretty easy one. That is the barrier between the residential and the police department itself and the state of disarray that's current fence is in. Next slide, please. One of the first things we did before we went and really analyzed the existing building is what kind of spaces do you need? I know you can't really read the chart, but after our analysis, we went down and determined what kind of spaces they're using now, what the size of those spaces are, and what do they need currently, and what do they need in the future. And when we went through these spaces, it's not about the adjacency in this study, it's really about square footage of how much space they need. Right now, the current facility is using about 8,400 square feet. That's not including the circulation in the building. After we started allocating how many spaces they need and the size of those spaces and the quantity of those spaces, we realized that they're needing around 1,600 square feet. That's about double what they have now currently. Next slide, please. Then we went through and looked at really the internal of the facility now. One of the main issues they have is office space. They're desperately needing enclosed office space. When we went through the office or the facility, we've seen some personnel that were using the conference room for a private personal office on a daily basis because there's just not enough room for them. There was also some other areas where they were utilizing spaces that aren't usually used for offices on a temporary basis just because of the privacy concerns of not having enough closed offices. Another one we had was storage challenges, and these are a big barrage of storage challenges, all the way from the storage of the detective materials and the things that they use in their area of expertise. Some of those happen to be stored in private offices, so you can see how that is hard for certain detectives to get to that information or those materials if they're not in a readily available, safe location within the facility. Other storage facility issues are even on the other side. File storage, which isn't as big now, is now in a larger room because it's secure, but it's not a very good use of that space. One of the largest ones we looked at was evidence storage. The current guidelines, there are IAPE guidelines that require or suggest you separate your storage for your evidence in certain locations and in certain ways to make it safe. That would be for gun storage, narcotic storage, large term storage, things of that nature. Right now, the facility is utilizing one space for all of those items in a very cramped space. There's also a way that you have to process that information and process those evidence in a proper way. That's very hard to do in the way that the standards are written for the facility that they currently have. I think they're doing a great job, but it's very underutilized space and not working very well for what they need. The multi-purpose room is another one looked at. It's a great space. It's used for a lot of things, but it also has some challenges as well. For instance, they use that for training. So anytime you have to use that for training, you have to pull all your stuff out. You got to set up the room. You got to get it ready, and then you got to tear it back down because that space may be used for a public event later. When they have public events, these spaces don't have adequate room for food or for prepping of things of that nature that the meetings may need. Or if they're after hours, you have no facilities that you could use for that space without going through areas that are more secure. So there's some arrangements and adjacency issues with those. Waiting vestibule reception areas, these spaces used to be used for a dispatch office. They're no longer used for that. So the configuration doesn't really work very well for the proper use of those spaces. And we found a lot of underutilized spaces just because of the way that the operations of the police department is done at this time is different than it used to be. We no longer hold perpetrators at this facility, but we have many jail cells and holding cells within the facility. We don't fingerprint people, but there is processing rooms still within this facility that are just underutilized spaces. So that's the kind of items that we went through and tried to document to see what is there, what is working, what is not working. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of the existing facility. Everything in pink is places that we determined were needed to be relocated or revised based on their current operations. Everything that's in orange is spaces that are underutilized spaces that are just not used because of the way that those functions just aren't at this building, or that the way that they operate on a daily basis make them inefficient. Next slide, please. So what we did was we take that information, we started to make some suggestions for how we can remodel this interior space. But that also takes you having to move some of these out of here. So what we wanted to do is take some of these rooms that are not being utilized anymore and reconfigure those. File rooms that are too big can be now used as offices. Work rooms, we can relocate that stuff to another place and create another office. The current locker room is inefficient because of its size, and we've increased the amount of officers that we use on a daily basis on their shifts. Now the locker rooms that they have to go into are a little too small. So what we want to do is move the current evidence room and expand the locker room to allow them to have the facilities they need. That also meets the ADA requirements. Proper interview rooms. Right now their interview room is very small, it's dank, it's in the wrong location, and it doesn't really allow you to do some of the new interrogation techniques that are out there for calming spaces, the right type of furniture, the right feel of the space to really get someone to talk to you and give that type of information that the officers truly need. Storage, we're talking to moving some things out so you can put dedicated storage for the evidence locker and have a location where a dedicated office for the evidence, so when officers bring them in, it comes through one location, It's very secure. It's also located where if a customer or a public need to come in to actually require some of their evidence back, they can do so in a proper manner. Next slide, please. This kind of helps show some of those revisions that we're proposing. One is to move that in the upper right-hand corner. We're expanding the facility for the restroom facilities so that it meets the requirements. In the center of the space, you'll see that we're starting to take some of those areas that were underutilized and making those into offices. One of the largest things you probably see is to the lower right-hand corner is a complete new evidence area for storage. You have a dedicated office for all of that evidence to come through, be properly categoried, put in the correct room per IAPE guidelines, so that has the narcotics has the right dedicated mechanical system to vent the thing to make it to work right. You got a larger office place for large storage for long term. The reception area has been changed to add an outside vestibule to allow multiple receptionists talk to people at one time instead of one receptionist at one window. It also gives you a better safe environment for bringing people into the place, at deliveries in place, to have a holding area before that you get into the building. Next slide, please. Then we started to look at some of these building additions, because we can't really solve the problem with just the internal of the existing building. There's a lot of things that can be done to make that building more efficient for the officers, but there's also still space, missing space, and you can kind of see with that one of the earlier slides where we're missing about 8,000 to 9,000 square foot of additional space that we need. So we started looking at building options for additions, and we're putting some cost to these so we can kind of see how they can all flesh out. The new entry vestibule, that would be right underneath the existing canopy, right off of that area. That was about, I think that was about $53,000. Additional sally port. The sally port is where the officers are able to store large evidence like cars and this type of thing. Also store some of their personnel vehicles for quick release out to calls. And then we also looked at additions. Right now you see we moved that multi-purpose room. That's really a valuable space for the officers, but the location of it just doesn't make sense for the way that the flow of the police department needs to go. So we looked at putting an addition that's about 3,000 square foot. And then that would be about $1.1 million. We also looked at what it would take to build that 2 levels up. And that way you'd have an additional 3,000 square foot. That would be about $900,000. Next slide. You can kind of see these down here now. These are the additions in blue. We're looking at putting one of those additions just to the south of the existing facility. Looking at putting some of these sally port that we talked about just next to the existing sally port on the east side. And also, this slide is also showing some like covered parking just to the east of the sally port. If we start to look at all those interior remodels, you're looking about $300,000 for those. If you put in a building addition option 1, that would be for second and first floor. We're looking at a total of about $2.8 million, and that gets them about 18,000 square foot total for that area. And if you're looking at our earlier target, that we're meeting that target with just a little bit of room for the circulation and vertical circulation, especially in this model. So we felt like this was kind of a good use of that of the existing facility and the area that they have around the building to allow them to get the amount of square footage that they need to operate properly. Next slide, please. We also want to look at a couple other additions while we're at it. Major Tennis and Chief Campbell were really wondering what would it be if we didn't just go up, maybe we just went out. So instead of putting a second level on that first block, what if we build a second level or a second block on first floor? That way everything's on one floor. that would be a little bit more money. You'd actually be adding about $36,000 to be all on one floor instead of going up two. There's some other considerations when you do that. You know, if you're going 2 floors, what does that look like with the existing facility? The facility is not a 2-story building, so the aesthetics may come into this play a little bit as well. Next, you know, we wanted, what can we do to really max out this site? Well, let's put a second floor over both of those blue blocks right there. That way, you're really maxing out the amount of square footage you can add to this site around the existing facility. It's much more than they needed as far as overall square footage. That gets you another 7,000 square foot. But the thought is that we're already building a building. We're already, that way we can plan for the future, and some of this infill could possibly be used not only by the police department, but by CU with their existing building right next door, or maybe even further facilities for City Hall or for the city itself in close proximity to where we're at now. So that was another item that we looked at. We also looked at, this also has the number for the covered four-car park, covered park over there to the side as well. Next slide, please. So this kind of shows it in the context of the overall site. I didn't talk very much about the parallel parking over to the west side, but that was something that we wanted to look at, not only for easy approach to the building for the police officers, someone for them to be protected as they're coming in and out of the building from perpetrators that may be around the site, and also another area that we can have covered parking for a few vehicles that could come out in a very quick manner for anything that may be a very quick call. Next slide, please. Next, I want to kind of talk about site improvements. We talked about kind of the interior of the building. We talked a little bit about additional building additions to the site. What kind of site improvements are we really looking at? Well, the easy one was the privacy fence. So that really is starting to deteriorate between the residential and the public there. That can cause really some safety concerns, especially right now with the patrol cars where they're at. That could get really quick, easy access across that fence. The next thing we looked at was the west parking field. I kind of just talked about that. That was the little parallel parking addition over to the west side. Building protection for bollards. Right now there really is no deterrent from anybody entering the site in a car and approaching the building as close as they want, or ramming the building. There is just no safety precautions for the police department's facilities at this time. So we took all those in consideration and give some money values to those as well. The largest one is parking. Right now, the existing, we've got about 70 parking stalls. Based on code and the size of the building and sharing that with CU, they need about 86 stalls per code. So you're already short in that instance. And that really doesn't take into account that this is specific for the police department. So not only do you have employees, you have patrol cars, and that's not really taken into account to those numbers. That's just what the code requires. If we start building on all these additions, those are going to require more parking as well, not only just because we're increasing our personnel and patrols that are in the building, but square footage-wise, you're going to have more people. And so by the time you're done, we're looking around 164 stalls. Well, you look at that site, where do you put them? I mean, that's a big dilemma for that site. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So about the only place that's left is the detention basin. That's kind of a scary thing, because detention basins are there for a reason. That's to catch water so it doesn't flood somewhere else. So, but there is ways to put parking over detention basins. It's kind of a costly thing that you put to detention underneath the ground. And there's different ways of doing that. We got a pretty range of numbers. You can see there anywhere from 700,000 to 1.8 million. That's a huge difference. It's just because the engineering and the design of something like that can vary such significantly. There's going to be a very ranging cost for something like that. But it's definitely something that really needs to be analyzed for this site, because the facility needs to grow. The department is growing, and the facility is just not right now. They're already, working very well with what they have, but it's very deficient. They already have some areas that they're, storage off-site and things of that nature that just makes operations inefficient. So this is about the only place to put that parking, which that's why you're going to have to consider that. Next slide, please. So then we kind of looked at the comparison between the two. If we did everything we talked about today, all the square footage, you're looking at about 25,000 square foot, almost 26. Well, that's still a lot more than the police department needs now, but let's compare those numbers to another facility or a brand-new facility. If we took all those in, what we're proposing is anywhere from $5 million to $6 million in overall cost for those building additions, the parking, the interior remodel, everything. We put that to a factor of, what was it, a new facility? Well, you're looking at about 6.3 million. It's really close to the same numbers. The difference is you don't have a site for the new facility. When you start to take in the cost for the site and whatever else may come with that site, depending on where it is, it could be the infrastructure to the site. It could be that it's a slope site. It could be that it has a lot of rock underneath the site. There's so many different factors that come with the site. That number is going to exponentially grow depending on what that location is. And you also got to find their location. What's the best location for the city? Is it centralized? You don't want it on the very outskirts of town. You can't do your calls. So is the location that we have now, is that where it really needs to be? If so, then some of those remodel options are what you really need to be looking at. If we have another location, then the money may be better well spent on a brand new facility where you can get everything you want at once and design it to the T rather than remodeling. But that site and location, I think, is huge. So that's kind of where we were at on the billing analysis in the site. Like I said, it was a great opportunity to meet with the chief and go over his operations and see what he does on a daily day out there with his patrols. I think they do a great job with the facility that they have, but they definitely have a lot of challenges that they're overcoming on a daily basis that is really eventually going to start affecting, in my mind, the time for calls and the efficiency of how they can run that facility. Next slide. And that's pretty much all of my presentation. Next slide, please. And so, do you have any questions? I threw a lot out there, so.
It seemed very thorough.
Hopefully I didn't put you to sleep. But no, thank you.
Mr. Albers, before you step off,
Yeah.
I do have a quick question. Did we take did we look at how far out that anticipated space would be adequate for the police department, considering how quickly they've been growing?
Not exactly on the time frame. It was more just looking at how long that you want to work with some of the efficiencies that they currently have.
Gotcha.
I mean, I think there's some things that could be done immediately internally to reallocate some of these areas that are just not being used as they originally intended. So there's probably things that could be done to help facilitate some of that before the large additions are done. But I think the need is already there in a lot of respects on how they operate on a daily basis.
Sure. Yeah, and I absolutely agree. I just wondered at the 26,000 square feet about how, I mean, maybe Chief, this.
And that's a lot larger than what they need. And
Okay.
if you go back, we're only needing about 16. But the thought process is to look at some other options to allow us to make an educated decision on building just what is needed now, or max out our building as we are building at this time, so that you already have that space for whatever those future needs may be. Like I said, not only just the police department, but possibly the city utilities or the city themselves as they start to grow and expand in this campus.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
One other thing I guess I didn't put in there was kind of the money. We did use Nabholz, or a local contractor. They do a lot of work locally, if not, and also nationally. I've worked with them personally. They do a really good job. But all these numbers are estimates. They're based on cost per square footage. If you get a Pinto, it's going to be one thing. If you get a Porsche, it's going to be another. So a lot of those still depend on what you put into your facility and how that's designed. So And also that this report was done in September of 2020. We did that right before we're starting to realize the impact cost of the current economy and the impacts of COVID. We've seen the cost of materials and skyrocket in the past few years, or I mean, the past few months. So those type of things would have to be factored into these costs. These are more just to give you a guide for planning purposes. If it was, my suggestion would be to take this, decide where you want to go with it, and do, start to do some preliminary design to get a core base of what the layout is and what the look is, then do another cost analysis with the contractor to get some more accurate numbers. That way you can budget in a much more precise way, would be my suggestion. One of the things they put in this report is that you should put about a 4% increase per annually. Well, I think that 4% is probably already a little greater than these numbers just because of the current commodity, if you were building just today, So,
Fantastic. Thank you, sir.
thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the ordinance section. First reading Bill 2021-071.
First reading, Council Bill Number 2021-071, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa accepting the bid of Build Tech Construction Incorporated for the Well House Number 1 Improvement Project and authorizing the city administrator to execute a contract for same.
Travis.
Mayor and council, identified in the 2021 CIP, this project includes the demolition and reconstruction of a well house at well site number 1, located in the original downtown area, St. Louis Street. The existing well house was constructed in 1948 and includes under roof a 250,000-gallon ground storage facility. Now, that ground storage tank was taken offline in the early 60s whenever the water tower at well 1 was constructed. However, because it is interior to destruction, it remained. The facility is currently in a state of extreme disrepair. The roof is actually being supported by that original ground storage tank. So this project will include the demolition and removal of the existing ground storage tank along with the existing structure and allow for the construction of a new well house that includes a separate disinfection room for our chlorine and fluoride operations. The city did receive 3 bids on the project, originally budgeted for $400,000. Those bids range from a low of $324,000 to a high of $397,332. Build Tech Construction was the low bidder at $324,000, coming in at $76,000 under budget. Staff is recommending approval of the ordinance to allow for Build Tech Construction to not only remove the existing structure, but build a new structure in its place.
Any questions? Thank you, Travis.
Thank you.
We will open up the public hearing. If you'd like to speak on this item, you can do so at this time.
Just have one question. The well house is going to be built, and we're going to spend money for disinfection room for the chlorine and fluoride injection program. I'm just wondering if the fluoride injection program wasn't there, would that change the cost of the construction?
Travis.
No, it would not change the cost of construction because the construction includes the actual building facility itself. We are under DNR requirements to chlorinate our water, so therefore a disinfection room would still need to be constructed in order to accommodate those chlorine facilities. The fluoride facilities come into addition to the chlorine, and the room will accommodate both.
That's a very small thing, right?
Yes,
the fluoride
yes.
thing is like just a.
Currently, those operations are housed because the original structure built in 48 did not accommodate that. We have a separate structure outside of the existing well house. This will move those facilities internal into a separated room from the actual well itself as required by DNR. Our other well houses that provide injection also have the separation room.
And we'll leave open the public hearing. And close the public hearing. Any further discussion? All right, we'll move on to Bill 2021-073.
First reading, Council Bill Number 2021-073, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa calling for a special election on November 2nd, 2021, to submit to the qualified voters of the city the question of whether to recall Mayor Brian Steele, authorizing the city clerk to do all things necessary or convenient to submit said question, and amending the 2021 annual budget to provide funding for said special election.
Cindy,
This is me.
I'm going to assume it's you.
This is me. As you all know, on June 28th, the clerk's office received a recall petition submitted by the petitioners committee. Once it was received, I sent it over to the county for verification of the qualified signatures. Of the 97 signatures that were submitted, 73 were found to qualify. Once that was done, I sent a certificate of sufficiency to the petitioners committee, to Mr. Sanders. And after that, according to section 10-6C of the Home Rule Charter, once that has been certified by the city clerk, the council at its next meeting shall fix a date for holding the election. The election shall be held at the next available regular or special election date as established by Missouri election calendar. So this evening, for your consideration, I have before you a council bill that would call for the election on November 2nd, 2021, recalling the mayor. And also included in the ordinance is a budget request for a budget amendment of $15,000 for anticipated costs for this election. When speaking with Kay Brown, she was not able to give me a exact estimate. She didn't know. So I'm basing this on our election costs for the April election. Should the $15,000 not be sufficient, I will be coming back for an additional budget amendment. But right now, I'm submitting $15,000, hoping that'll cover it. Do you have any, the deadline for the November election, I have to have it certified by August 24th. Do you have any questions regarding the ordinance tonight?
Any questions?
I don't have a question, but I'd like to address it.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'd like to address, this bill, which is it's regarding the special election on November 2nd to recall Mayor Brian Steele. The last time I spoke on this was April 12th of this year. In that speech, I brought up a variety of issues with recall, and I'm not going to repeat my speech, but I did want to paraphrase a few things. Ronald Reagan once said, "Someone who agrees with you 80% of the time is a friend and an ally, not a 20% traitor." Now, I really want those words to be heard, so I'm going to say it again. Someone who agrees with you 80% of the time is a friend and an ally, not a 20% traitor. So keep that in mind as I move forward. Mayor Brian Steele began serving on this council in 2010. He won re-election in 2011, ran for mayor in 2014, was re-elected in 2017, and again in 2020. He has served in an official capacity for the city of Nixa for 11 years. Now I went back and I found that in 2010, Brian Steele cast 101 votes while on this council. In 2011, he cast 162 votes. In 2012, 160. Now, by that time, it was 10:45 last night, and it was kind of late, so I decided to average his votes. Seeing as 2011 and 2012 were fairly consistent, each being a full year from January to December, I decided that it was reasonable to assume that in 2013 and 2014, 160 votes were cast as well. Now, in 2014, his role changed. He went from being a council member to mayor. However, as mayor, he must still sign every ordinance that comes through and is still involved with the process. So that being said, from 2020 to today, it is reasonable to assume that Mayor Steele has been involved with roughly 1,701 votes in decisions throughout his service to the city of Nixa. Regarding Reagan's philosophy, the recall committee would have standing if they disagreed with 341 votes in decisions that the mayor has made in public life. As I see it, the recall committee disagrees with just one decision that was granted to him by the city council unanimously through the legislative process. So I'd like to move to the language of the petition and the reasoning behind recall. Petition to recall Brian Steele, the mayor of Nixa, Missouri, for individually and without regard to the citizens of Nixa, nor the vote of the city council, enacting a mask mandate and taking other actions detrimental to the city of Nixa, its economy, and the health and welfare of the community. So let's go through that point by point. Individually. Individually means he acted alone. This is not the case. Mayor Steele acted in coordination with the mayor of Ozark and through the powers provided to him through a vote of the council on ordinances 2110 and 2111. Those were passed unanimously. Without regard to the citizens of Nixa implies that he did not have many conversations with citizens regarding the mask mandate, which he did. Vote of the city council looks at a specific vote that we took 3 months prior to hitting the peak in the pandemic. That section, again, does not take into account the unanimous vote of passage of 2110 and 2111. Its economy seems to suggest that the decisions the mayor made caused the city to lose revenue. Sales tax numbers are a good indicator of a local economy from year to year, and in 2020, numbers indicate a 14% growth over 2019. 2021 indicates a 10% growth so far. We were also one of the only chambers in the area to grow in 2020. That shows a good economy. So if anything, we should be commending Mayor Brian Steele for such strong numbers. Health and welfare of the community in general. This one I'm really struggling with because the mask mandate was in response to a public health crisis meant to protect the health and welfare of the citizens. Now we can argue the merits of choice, and that's a very reasonable argument. However, the mayor also indicated that while people have a choice on where and how they want to shop and how they want to limit their exposure, the order was also to help employees of retail that didn't have that choice. They had to go into work and had potential for exposure, but had to do it so they could pay their bills. There have been other arguments this committee has made regarding mental health. I've personally struggled with PTSD since 2018. I was finally diagnosed with PTSD in 2020, and now I'm happily in recovery from PTSD. I get mental health. What I don't get is how the mayor's actions specifically are tied to mental health, unless you're referring to the lockdown, which has nothing to do with the mayor. The lockdown was passed through the Department of Health and Social Services executive order. Moving forward, the petition to recall the mayor garnered 73 valid signatures. The committee had the petition for 88 days of a 90-day allotment, which represents obtaining 0.8 valid signatures per day. As of July 7th, I called the county clerk's office and asked how many people are registered to vote in the city of Nixa. The number they provided did surprise me. It was, at that time, it was 16,101 voters inside city limits. So people really do need to vote more, and I'll agree with you on that point. However, what that means is that about 0.4% of the total voting population was needed to charge taxpayers $15,000 for this election. To me, that is a huge waste of time and resources. Now, that being said, council does have an obligation to follow the charter and pass this ordinance regardless of personal feelings, because we took an oath to follow the charter. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Does anyone else have any other questions or thoughts? All right. We will have a public hearing here in just a second. We will open up the public hearing. Whoever would like to come and speak to this item, you can do so at this time.
Jeff Belcher, 203 South Ellen, Nixa, Missouri. Mr. Orff, I appreciate your reference to Ronald Reagan and the 80-20 thing there. However, I can assure you 100%, this issue could have been put to bed months and months and months ago. We've begged and pleaded with the council. Do it the right way, put it up for a vote. You refused. Each and every one of you refused to do it the correct way. And now you want to cry wolf because it's going to cost us $15,000. Did you not think of that when you could have put it up for a vote, all of those different, numerous council meetings? It was on the table. It was requested. We begged. Do it the right way and we will disappear on this issue. We will be gone. So it takes a lot of audacity to sit here and point a finger at citizens that are exercising their rights as duly allowed by your own charter that Mr. Steele himself helped author. It's ridiculous. And then we've got another one over here talking about how inadequately inept, I can't remember the exact words, of a council that would approve such a home rule charter. So are we friends? Are we not friends? Are we doing it by the book? Are we not doing it by the book? The people are confused. I had two people come up to me out of the blue today. Hey, I appreciate what you're doing. Keep fighting the fight. Stand up. Somebody needs to. Hold them accountable. So I ask you, if you want to be held accountable, why for 10 months did you all refuse to put it for a vote and end this recall process? The ball was in your court numerous times. So we can talk about the 80-20. That's fine. I appreciate that. I happen to respect Ronald Reagan. I think he was one of the greater presidents we had. What I'm talking about is 100%. You all had 100% opportunity to bring it to a vote. You refused. So how dare you point the fingers at the recall committee when you had the ball in your court the entire time? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Belcher, for acknowledging that the council did have the opportunity to vote on the masking ordinance at any point along the way. We'll leave the public hearing open. If anyone else would like to speak, you can do so at this time.
My name's Ron Sanders, live at 976 Glen Oaks Drive. And just one thing that I would like to say is, as a city council, what powers do you have to grant the mayor? There are limiting principles in the Nixa Home Charter. There are responsibilities and there are enumerated powers whenever it comes to emergencies in the Nixa Home Charter. We can't have a city council that can give unlimited powers to an executive. That's why those limiting principles are in the Home Charter. They're there already to say this is the job of the mayor. As an executive, this is what he does. This is what he does when there's an emergency. This is, what his powers are, whenever he handles various jobs that he has to do. So even though we have the power of legislation, we don't have the unlimited power to say, hey, us, 6 people are going to come together and write up an ordinance and give the mayor the power to, do anything. There are limiting principles. And they're already spelled out in the Home Charter. So it was the city council's responsibility to pass an ordinance, if so desired, whenever it came to a mask ordinance, or whenever it came specifically to the curfews, which you did, okay? And then we can take umbrage on, how they were used and everything. But there are limiting principles. And that's where, we went over the line. That's where y'all went over the line. If the mayor had the power to initiate a mask mandate in April when 2111 was passed, then why did we have to have an ordinance try to get passed in July? If he had that power in April, he could have just made the mask mandate happen in July without a vote of the city council. And that's where the problem began. And yes, we did come up here and we did ask y'all, please correct this over and over and over again. Now, as far as it being about the mask mandate, if it was about the mask mandate, then we would have to compare how things turned out with our city and how things turned out with the other cities comparable size and area and location that did not have a mask mandate. That would indicate whether it actually was a reasonable action, a prudent action, and an effective action. And if we take a look at that, I'm pretty sure y'all know where I'm going with it. The outcomes were pretty much the same. So, just to address your concerns, it should never be a 20%, 80% thing whenever it comes to an issue. It's spelled out. It's an issue. It's an issue that is spelled out, brought up by the citizens, and acted on by the citizens. I think that we came in here and we spoke plenty of times. We were very reasonable. We were passionate about, our position. But I don't think that we were ever unreasonable in how to make the repairs, make the corrections before it got to this point. So here we are, and this is how we're going to have to proceed. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. We will leave on public hearing. If anyone else would like to speak, they can do so at this time.
Council, my name is Kent Ward, 201 West State Street, Nixa, Missouri. Been a resident here since 2000. I have a couple of quick questions, and I'm hoping council can help me on this, figuring out between the two. Some of y'all may or may not recognize my face and notice I've been in and out of these meetings over the last 21 years. And I've not put my nose up too much. Occasionally with questions, I do come up. 14% 2020 sales tax growth. Can council or anybody let me know where that growth was? I.e., was it equal across the board as it has been in the past? Or was that, and this is a question that comes up, was that almost exclusively through Walmart's sales tax through us? Or does the council know or anybody know?
I don't believe we can track to that specific a level. Jennifer?
We are given access to sales tax reports that disseminate particular retailers, but under state statute, we're not allowed to disseminate that particular information as to which retailers contribute which amounts.
Forgive me, you said under state statute, you're not allowed to disseminate.
We are not allowed to disseminate that information.
Okay.
They don't disseminate it to us either. So,
Okay.
Anecdotally, we did have one of the highest performing Walmarts. Our Walmart was one of the highest performing ones in the region. Also, our Big Whiskey was also one of the highest performing ones in the region as well. There were a couple of others where our Wendy's as well was one of the highest performing in the region as well. So, other ones where they have comparisons, we did very well on each of those as well.
Okay. I can report to y'all as a micro business in Nixa, Missouri, my sales tax reported to the state, turned into the state, was zero growth. Not zero, but it was the same from 2019 to 2020, and so far this year has been the same. So it's neither here nor there, just if they can't say, I can tell you from our micro business within. District Representative Orff, I do have a question, or one thing that you said, and sometimes I hear things from the council that saddens me, and one of the things that you brought up here is about it being 0.4% of the people that are trying to bring a $15,000 expense. I believe I've already said it, and if I haven't said it, I did not sign that petition. So before I get put in any camp, but we also need to remember, sir, that only 4% of the voters, just by the numbers, and I'm doing rough math, but you brought out 16,101 voters. That means only 4% of the voters bothered to show up and vote for either for or against the mayor. So it's still the 10% that's in our home rule. So let's be careful how we use numbers from the council. Sometimes things invoke other people, which resulted in part of, in my humble opinion, part of this whole problem that we're dealing with now. So it's 4% of the people showed up to vote. 10% of those people, by our home rule charter, are allowed to make that change. No, I believe that was all the questions I had, and, oh, no, I was confused on one more thing on the lockdown, was through which department?
It was the Department of Health and Senior Services
For the state?
for the state.
For the state.
Thank you very much. That was all I had.
You know, one of the points I think Mr. Belcher brought up earlier was that we had I had personally decided which businesses would be open. I think we just followed Mr. Lyles can comment one way or the other, but all of our stay-at-home orders during the initial part of the pandemic were all based off of the state orders. We were one of the first cities in the region to roll all those things back as well.
So I think a point of confusion there is, since we did issue an order as well, our order could be more restrictive than the governor's, but it couldn't be less restrictive. And so we followed what the governor had put forth, and I don't believe we were more restrictive. I think we like they said, we pretty much mirrored theirs exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will leave open the public hearing. If anyone else would like to speak, they can do so at this time. And we will close the public hearing. Any further discussion or comments by council?
I will say, more people do need to vote.
Yes.
That did surprise me. I called them 3 times, and I was like, "Are you sure that's the number?" And they said yes. And I was like, "Why don't they show up to the polls?" So,
Well, that's a very good precursor for our census numbers. I'm assuming we're going to have, if we have 16,000 registered voters, we have at least 6,000 or 7,000 children that go along with those registered voters, and so we should be somewhere in the mid-20s. That'd be very good for us.
Yeah, I was in the same election with that, and it was kind of sad.
That was definitely the lowest.
I had
That was
more friends than that.
That was the COVID election, so your friends didn't even come out and vote for you.
Right.
In that,
If you'll remember, it was affected by COVID.
Yep.
it's postponed.
It was
and, yeah.
postponed until June,
Yeah.
and there was a very low turnout.
But yeah, we normally don't get more than 1,200. Maybe that was the lowest turnout ever.
Yeah.
But we do have. We've always had very poor turnout in municipal elections, which
Yes.
is. I'm not sure how to do that. We'll have Drew work on that for next year. Drew says, "Yeah, I got it." All right, we will move on to the next bill, Bill 2021-074.
First reading, Council Bill Number 2021-074, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa amending the 2021 annual budget to appropriate funding for the fence portion of the city's dog park project.
Good evening. Yes, this budget amendment, it would be in the amount of $45,925 for the fencing at the dog park. Where that money had been in our budget, we did not get that rolled over into the 2021 budget. And so it is the monies that was left over coming out of 2020 into 2021. We just failed to get that moved over into the 2021 budget. So I'm just kind of needing to make that budget amendment in order to get this project completed in the dog park, which will get us about ready to open.
Awesome. Any questions for Matt? Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
We'll open the public hearing. If you'd like to speak to this item, you can do so.
I'll make this one real quick. I'm Jeff Belcher again, Nixa, Missouri. We're spending $46,000 on a fence for a dog park, but we're complaining and whining over $15,000 on doing the right thing, and
So this was previously budgeted money.
I understand that.
So-
It's still $46,000.
It was in our
Regardless.
strategic plan, and we're obligated to follow that.
Now, I ask, can I finish speaking?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. See, done maybe lost my train of thought there. This $46,000 fence, is this going to be maintained as part of city property?
Yes, it'll be a park.
Kids
It's a park property, so it'll be a new park.
Are kids going to climb it, hop it, destroy it, cut it, graffiti it, do whatever? Is it going
No,
to be
I believe
maintained,
It's a metal
guess?
fence, isn't it, Matt? Yeah, it's a metal fence designed for dog parks.
Okay. Reason I ask is I've got grandchildren that play up at the city park, different sports. The flower gardens we have there are deplorable. If my weeds were that tall, I'd probably have a citation on my mailbox. I don't know if anybody's aware of that or not. They're pretty horrible. And again, the bathrooms, like I said, that's been a different conversation. I wouldn't send my dog into the public restrooms that we have for our children. Yet we're gonna spend $46,000 on a fence for dogs. Where's our priorities at, folks?
We are planning a refresh of, at least the Macaulay Park bathrooms, I know. Both now, okay. So yeah, we are working on that project as well. Okay, so yeah, we're working on that project. as we
Fantastic. I
speak.
guess I missed a meeting and didn't catch that email there.
It's one of those things that kind of just goes through and happens.
I'm sure things take time, if we forget to budget project money and roll over for the next year. I mean, I can see where that would be confusing and, take some time to get done. But again, we're looking at $46,000. Hopefully it's maintained better than the flower gardens are. They're kind of meant to be a attractive site, something to attract people, and they're not looking very attractive. I've seen one old feller up there, probably 80-some years old, doing his best. He's down there on his hands and knees plucking weeds. Do we not have employees that
They
maintain
are
parks?
volunteer-maintained gardens. They're maintained by volunteers, so.
Okay, well, I would think maybe the city could propose an ordinance to have some of the city guys swing by there once in a while and do it, so we don't have 80-year-old people out there in the heat trying to beautify something that should be beautiful. And it's a pretty popular destination, pretty popular spot, and a lot of people are seeing that. And it's pretty disheartening when you're gonna let your grass get too tall and get an ordinance written up and, get a fine from the city. But the parks are okay. It's just kind of ironic there, and that's all I've got on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Belcher.
Mr. Sanders, if the committee to recall the mayor would like to do some public service, you guys could meet me up there and we could pull some weeds. All right.
Sounds good. I like it. We'll leave the public hearing open. If anyone else would like to speak, you can do so at this time. On computer. And we'll close the public hearing. Any further discussion on the dog park fence? Nope. All right, move on to the next one, 2021-075.
First reading, Council Bill 2021-075, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa accepting the bid of K&B Equipment LLC for the adjustment of certain sewer utility access points, authorizing the city administrator execute a contract for same, and amending the 2021 annual budget to provide funding for same.
Travis?
All right, the purpose of this project is to provide for facility improvements on the sewer side to make adjustments to existing manholes that are located within the MoDOT corridor on the east side of town. Unfortunately, this does necessitate a budget amendment. At the time of budget preparation last year, we were not aware of the need for the sewer adjustments to the manholes because MoDOT had not completed the full design of the plans. This spring, we were provided with the plans for the upcoming highway project on the east side of town, and it did include final grades that necessitate that we make adjustments to some of our manholes. There are approximately 14 that need to be adjusted and raised up to match the final grade for the highway project. So we are requesting a budget amendment of $60,000 to accommodate the relocation or the adjustment to the existing manholes along the Highway 14 corridor. We do have a request submitted to MoDOT for a reimbursement of $12,875,000 of that. One of the manholes that is needing to be raised is located within an existing city easement, not MoDOT right-of-way. Facilities that are located within the right-of-way, the city is responsible for absorbing the cost of their relocation or adjustment. Those facilities that are located that were located in an existing city easement, the city can submit for a reimbursement to MoDOT because we were not located within their right-of-way. One of the manholes was located within an existing city easement, which has been absorbed into the new MoDOT right-of-way. However, that authorized us to submit that reimbursement. So we have submitted the appropriate paperwork and are waiting for approval from MoDOT for a portion of the project to be reimbursed through the MoDOT funds. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. We did receive 2 bids. K&B Construction was the low bidder on the project, and staff has recommended awarding it to that construction company.
Any questions for Travis? Thank you, Travis.
Okay, thank you.
We will open the public hearing. If anyone would like to speak to this, you can at this time. close the public hearing. Any further discussion? Nope. Oh, thought somebody said something. Surprised. All right, move on to the next one, 2021-076.
First reading, Council Bill Number 2021-076, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa amending the 2021 annual budget to appropriate funding for an outstanding invoice for maintenance on Water Tower Number 5.
Mayor and Council, good evening. This bill would authorize a budget amendment to the water fund to cover a long outstanding bill that we have from work we did on Water Tower Number 5. In April of 2014, we contracted with Utility Services Company to do maintenance and inspection work to Tower 5, which is the one we just redid at the high school. So it's been that long ago. The contractor completed their work. They left the job site. Didn't really clean up like they should have. They didn't fulfill the contract in that they didn't provide us with an inspection report, which is part of the requirements. Typically, those inspection reports will be interior before and after the fact, photographs, that type of thing, so we can plan for future maintenance work on the towers. In addition to that, they didn't send us a final invoice. That final invoice amounted to $43,340. Staff worked to try to get the inspection report and the final invoice through the rest of 2014 into 2015. We actually carried the monies over into 2015 in case the bill were to come in. Finally, in October, upon Mr. Dickensheet sending a certified letter asking that, and they never showed up, we just finally dropped it from the budget, and we haven't had it on the budget ever since. In May of this year, we received a request from Utility Services for the final payment of the outstanding bill. We've had a number of conversations internally, as well as emails back and forth on what to do with it. And at the end of the day, you know, we still owe the bill. We've been advised to go ahead and pay it, and so I'm coming to you for this budget amendment of that amount so we can pay that outstanding bill.
Any questions? I assume we're not doing any additional work with them.
We are not, and yes, we are not. They've had some bad reports. Have they even bid on a project since then? They haven't even bid a project since then, and we do these every year, as you well know. So.
Any questions? Thank you, Doug.
Yep.
We will open the public hearing. And close the public hearing. Any further discussion? All right, move on to second reading, 2021-068.
Second reading, Council Bill Number 2021-068, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa repealing Ordinance Number 2110 and Ordinance 2111 for the purpose of terminating the state of an emergency and emergency powers granted to the mayor to address the COVID-19 pandemic.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. There we go. I'm before you this evening to discuss or present Council Bill 2021-068, which, as the title states, would repeal Ordinance 2110 and 2111, which would also repeal the city's emergency declaration and the grant of emergency powers to the mayor. So, yeah, the left button is not doing it.
Turn it on. There you go. Try that.
Next slide, please.
I'm figuring it out, sorry. I should have tested this before I came in. Okay,
There you
there we go. Sorry about that. So before we get to the substance of the bill, I wanted to go over some of the procedural posture, some of the legislative history of this bill and how it got to us this evening. This bill was originally first read at Council's June 28th, 2021 regular meeting. It was slated for second reading and final passage at the July 12th, 2021 meeting. However, Council adopted a motion to postpone the bill. The language of that motion was to postpone it to the next available regular City Council meeting, which is this evening's meeting. So therefore, the bill is again on Council's agenda tonight for second reading and potential final passage. Having discussed how the bill got to us this evening, I'm just going to go over briefly a summary of the bill. I provided this at the first reading, but just to go over it again. The substance of this bill, it would repeal Ordinance 2110 and 2111, which Councilman Orf's already mentioned. These were adopted in March of 2020, and these bills combined, or these ordinances combined, constitute the city's current declared state of emergency as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and also contain a grant of emergency authority to the mayor to address issues related to the COVID-19 pandemic. If Council Bill 2021-068 is approved, then these two ordinances would no longer be a force in effect, and so that state of emergency and that grant of emergency powers would also no longer be in effect. Also at your places tonight is a document titled Amendment Number 1. It's an amendment to this council bill based off of the motion to postpone that was presented at the last council meeting. It was thought that perhaps trying to alter the bill to give council more time to consider whether it's the appropriate time to dissolve the state of emergency would be appropriate. So Amendment Number 1 is an attempt at that. If approved, it would modify the effective date of the bill, which is at Section 2. Instead of it being effective when council approves it and the mayor signs it, it would be effective on September 1. This means that the repeal action that's at the heart of the bill would occur on September 1, not after council's approval and not after the mayor's signature. Why September 1? Currently, the state of Missouri is under a state of emergency that's declared in Executive Order 2107, which is issued by the governor. That remains in effect until August 31st of 2021. Amendment Number 1 would try to coincide these, maybe give us a little bit of time to see what the governor may do, because if council wanted to extend the emergency declaration, they could do that by a subsequent ordinance. So it kind of sets up a situation where we have a date certain on when these provisions would end, but it also gives the council the tool to continue to push that goalpost out depending on the facts of the ground at the time. So I just have a version of the amendment there next to the draft of the ordinance, and it would be Section 2 that would be changed to accomplish that, to change the effective date to September 1st. And that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions that the council may have about this particular bill or that motion. That isn't the only, I mean, I'm here to draft any amendments or motions that council may have on this question. So this isn't the one that has to be settled on. It's just kind of throwing something out there for discussion.
Yeah, so as you stated, I was the one that made the motion to postpone. The reason I did that was because, I was hesitant to end our state of emergency for Nixa when we're still in one with the governor. And so I wanted more time to kind of look at amendments and stuff like that. And I think it makes logical sense to tie our state of emergency order to the governor's state of emergency order so that, ours will end when his ends, and so we're not ending before his. I know his is set to expire August 31st. It's possible it could be extended. So I would like to propose an amendment that instead of it ending on September 1st, it would, so basically this ordinance shall be in full effect, or full force and effect, the repeal, on September 1st, 2021, or upon expiration of the Missouri governor's state of emergency relating to COVID-19, whichever event occurs later.
And I believe that motion was also provided to council this evening too. So you should have that, and it should be labeled as Amendment Number 2.
I think my only concern, which I believe has been addressed with this, is giving the city administrator the right to change time off due to COVID-related instances. As long as, as far as I'm concerned, the state's already under an emergency order, so for ours to expire with theirs is perfect to me. But just as long as Mr. Lyles still has the ability to make those changes on the fly without having to come to us to ask for permission to be able to put in a new COVID policy if people need to be gone, to grant days if someone has to be quarantined or whatever that may be. So it's where I sit is, as long as that's still, because I feel like kind of going forward, that's really the main thing that is going to be involved. As long as that's still fine, I could care. I mean, either way is fine with me.
Anyone
Yeah,
else?
Mr. Giddens, that would still, with this, if this is extended, that will still be in place, because it'll still be part of the emergency declaration for the city. Now, if it's not, there is a potential that I could make city policy changes without coming to council, but it's just been past practice that we typically bring those to council as a resolution to show support of that. But technically, I could still make those internal decisions.
As long as they didn't violate anything that council had approved by resolution, the administrator already has that authority under the charter. And then if there is something that would require a change, those are accomplished by resolution, which are, it's a one reading action. So I'm not trying to, obviously, I'm not trying to get into the policy debate on that. I'm just trying to give you clear eyes on if there were to be an issue, that's probably the process we would go through. Either it could be handled internally under the administrator's authority under the charter, or we would come to council with a resolution, which wouldn't be a two reading measure.
Would be one. But I would, without researching all the resolutions that were passed, my big concern is if we have a spike amongst our employees, I want to be able to make those decisions very quickly to be able to ensure the safety of our citizens and our employees as well. So definitely a concern of mine.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll open up the public hearing. If you'd like to speak to this item, you can do so at this time. And we will close the public hearing. Would someone like to make a motion for one of the amendments?
I'll make a motion on amendment number 2.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So then we need a motion to approve the bill as amended.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
So now you would, so we'll have a roll call. The roll call, if you vote no, the current state of emergency ordinances will stay in place and without any termination date in the future. If you vote yes, the termination date will be September 1st or whenever the governor's order expires. Roll call, please.
Jared Giddens,
Yes.
Aaron Peterson,
Yes.
Darlene Graham,
Yes.
Amy Hookstrat,
Yes.
Sean Lucas,
Yes.
Justin Orr.
Yes.
Thank you all. We'll move on whenever you're ready, Cindy, to 2021-072.
Second reading, Council Bill Number 2021-072, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa amending Chapter 117, Article 7, Section 117-277 of the Nixa City Code to modify the residential side yard requirements.
Good evening. Earlier this year, the City Council modified the city's zoning code concerning several aspects of dimensional regulations, including residential side yard setbacks. At the time, staff had recommended to the council a couple of amendments that would change residential side yard setbacks so that they were congruent with what's required by the International Residential Building Code. Unfortunately, I presented some information at that meeting that made it appear as though if council adopted amendment number 2, it would accomplish both the content of amendments 1 and 2 together. But in reality, amendment 1 was prerequisite to amendment number 2, such that you had to adopt both for it to accomplish what was the council's intent. And so just by adopting amendment number 2, it really didn't change anything. So we need to now come back and correct that by actually changing the 5 to a 7. Because right now what the city code says is that prior to May of this year, the residential side yard setback was 5, and afterward it's still 5, which obviously doesn't make any sense.
Any questions?
Nope.
We will open up the public hearing. and close the public hearing. Any further discussion? Motion to approve.
So made.
Second. Roll call, please.
Aaron Peterson,
Yes.
Darlene Graham,
Yes.
Amy Hookstrat,
Yes.
Sean Lucas,
Yes.
Justin Orff,
Yes.
Jared Giddens.
Yes.
And we'll move on to the resolutions. Resolution 2021-072.
Resolution number 2021-072, a resolution of the Council of the City of Nixa authorizing the city administrator to execute a contract extension with Central Bank of the Ozarks for banking services for the municipal court.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. What you have before you is a resolution to extend the contract for banking services with Central Bank of the Ozarks for the municipal court account only. In the background, I gave you some information. Every 3 to 5 years, we go out for banking services. We bid that out. The last contract we entered into was in 2017 with Central Bank for all of the city's bank accounts. And it was a 3-year contract with the option of 2 one-year extensions. Last year was our first 1-year extension, and due to the pandemic and the fall of interest rates, our renewal went from 1.7% and 1.8% to 0.45 and 0.5%. This year, the second 1-year extension, the interest rate fell even further to 0.1% on all accounts. I just kind of gave a brief history of the revenue that generates and the potential loss of revenue. So trying to do our due diligence to send that out for bid for banking services to see if we can maybe get a more competitive rate. We sent an RFP out for banking services July 15th. Central Bank has agreed to give us an extension at our current rates for all accounts, so that we can get that process done and get it, get that determined and start a new banking contract October 1st. But the municipal court account is sort of a different animal because we have to coordinate that bank account with the state court system, and all that information has to be passed through them. And so it's our recommendation to just keep that municipal court account with Central Bank and not include that in the RFP process. It's negligible. It's the average balance in that account is maybe $10,000, so the loss of revenue for that interest is pretty slim in comparison to the process of changing that bank account out with the state. So this recommendation is to enter into the contract to extend that 1 year with Central Bank for the municipal court account only. And we will be bringing to you a banking contract in September for an October 1 renewal or new bank, or however that shakes out when we get the results of the RFP. Any questions?
Any questions?
Are the interest rates, those are dictated by the federal?
Well, the Fed fund rates are what banks sort of look at. The T-bill, the option they gave was either 0.1 fixed rate or 75% of the 91-day T-bill, which the month of July it's been 0.05. So we may not be able to get any better competitive rates, but that's the bank's prerogative to decrease their margin. They may not make as much, but that's sort of a business decision that they can make if they want our business. So
In the past, we've done better because we have such a large continual balance in our funds for emergencies.
yeah, across the board, the city keeps about $34 million in banks. So the potential for them to earn the money is, and it all depends on if the bank needs the money, if they've got high loan balances, and how that's a whole other business, so.
Any other questions? Thank you. We will have a public hearing. If you'd like to speak to this item. And we'll close the public hearing. Any further discussion? Motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, move on to 2021-073.
Resolution number 2021-073, a resolution of the Council of the City of Nixa authorizing the city administrator to execute a contract with the Association of Professional Trainers for the use of a certain firing range.
Mayor, Council, tonight you have a resolution in front of you that would allow the city administrator to sign a contract with APT Firearms Academy. This is an annual contract that we have with them for firearms training at their facility. As you know, our actual range remains partially closed, which limits our ability to train there. This is a year-to-year contract. It has been reviewed by Mr. Woodman. He has no objection to it, and this year we're looking at $2,500 annually. Does anyone have any questions about this particular contract?
What was it last year?
It was the same last year. The year before that, it was dramatically less. So we've
Gotcha.
seen increases. I think he evaluates that year to year and how much impact we have on his ability to do his other training there.
Gotcha.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chief. We will open up the public hearing if you'd like to speak to this item. Close the public hearing. Any further discussion? Motion to approve?
So made. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. All right, move on to our discussion item of charter amendments.
All right, Mayor,
Yes,
Council.
sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. That's okay. Just
Let's get the right page up.
That's all right, giving you time. Mayor, Council's discussed earlier, there has been some discussion about possible charter amendments and taking those before the vote of the people. So staff tonight is just looking for some direction from council on how you would like for us to proceed. If you noticed, of course, the conversations mainly evolved around the recall petitions, but I would also, if council is considering possibly looking at charter amendment, I went ahead and included the initiative, referendum, and recall numbers only for reference. And also, as you see, their initiative currently requires 7% of total number of qualified voters registered to vote at the last regular municipal meeting. A referendum's 10% of the total number of qualified voters registered to vote at the last regular municipal election. And then the recall is 10% of the total number of votes cast for the office in the election at which the office was elected. From staff's recommendation, if council would like to put something for the people, it'd be our recommendation that council consider maybe making those close to the same, just for clarification for members of the public. You know, because if we have a 7% on one, a 10% on the other, or the other one a 10% or a 5% or a 7%, just something for consideration about maybe making them a little more clear for the public. So just a recommendation for consideration. But mainly today, again, staff's just kind of looking for some direction from council on how to proceed.
And for reference, for both the referendum and the recall, for a fourth-class city, it is, what we would be if we didn't have a home rule charter. Both of those are 25% of the eligible voters.
Correct.
So we would still be, even if we did 10% of eligible voters for all three of those, we'd still be, less than.
Below.
Yeah, less than almost a third of what city of our size would be elsewhere in the state.
Yeah, sorry, you can go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I had wanted to respond to Mr. Belcher's comments earlier on this issue, but knowing that we were going to be discussing this now, I waited, but he's gone, but that's okay. I'll just respond in general so that anyone can hear my thoughts. Both he and Mr. Sanders seemed to think that the reason that this is being brought up is because we feel threatened. In my mind, at least, this has absolutely nothing to do with feeling threatened. This has to do with having a responsibility to the citizens of Nixa so that something like this can't just be triggered so easily that it can be abused, because these elections are expensive. This election is going to cost at least $15,000, maybe more. As far as voter turnout, I completely agree with the mayor and probably everyone else in this room. Voter turnout's terrible. It's abysmal. And whereas I would love to see all 16,000 registered voters coming and voting in all of these elections, if we're being realistic here, that kind of sea change is not going to happen anytime soon. And especially in municipal elections, that's where you have the worst turnout. And in an election such as the mayor's last election, where he was running unopposed, people don't have a lot of motivation to come and vote when there's just one candidate, because they feel like, well, whether I vote or not, he's going to be the mayor, so what difference does it make? I'm not saying that's the right way to think about it. I wish everyone would vote, but they don't. And yes, it's correct that 4% of the voters elected the mayor. However, he serves 100% of registered voters, even the ones who didn't elect him. And when he is serving over 16,000 registered voters, it is my belief, I've stated it before and I'll state it again, that it should take more than 67 of those voters to trigger a recall election. A recall election is something very serious, very costly, as we've discussed. And if an elected official has done something that really warrants a recall election, it needs to take more than 67 signatures, and that shouldn't be a problem to achieve. So my proposal would be, I'd like to see the amount of 10% of registered voters, that number of signatures be the requirement for a recall. 10% of the registered voters in the affected district, meaning if it's the mayor, that would be 10% of the full 16,000 whatever, whereas if it's a council member, that would be 10% of the registered voters in that council member's district. That's what makes sense to me. I just think that it needs to be raised to a much more practical, much more responsible number. And I guess if there's one silver lining of this recall election, it's the fact that this has been brought to our attention. And I would like to stop something like this happening again. I know that there's talk of recalling me next. Anyone can speak up if they disagree. I don't believe I've done anything so far in my incredibly short tenure on city council to warrant being recalled. But all they would need is 56 signatures to recall me. So if the city wants to pay for another expensive recall election, then, I guess they will not vote to increase this number. And if they don't want to pay for another expensive and unnecessary recall election, then they will. And it's going to be up to the people in the end. So we can propose it, we can put it on the ballot, the people will have the final word. So that's about all I have to say.
Yeah, so I was going to say, one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up is I got calls from people. I've talked to people who originally authored the Home Rule Charter, and they said, this is too low. And so when the authors of the charter say this is not how we meant it to be, we should change it, I think they should be given that opportunity. I've had people call me and they're saying, what can I do to stop this? And I said, you can't. What you can do is you can work on the Home Rule Charter and get that fixed, because they've done everything correctly. So with that, in talking with the authors, some of the authors of the Home Rule, and getting constituent emails saying this is a waste of time, getting calls saying, what can I do? I'm fine with bringing this back up, because people are upset.
Mm-hmm.
And, if we want to do 10% of the votes cast in a district, District 3 or whatever, I'm okay with that. If we want the Home Rule Charter to reconvene and recommend a change to council, I'm okay with that. I don't know. The thing is, for my election, there were 600 votes cast when I was reelected in the smallest district of Nixa currently, because we haven't redistricted yet. You only need 8 more signatures to get the mayor who represents a city.
Mm-hmm.
And, more people do need to vote. I wish more people had voted. And we should encourage people to vote as much as possible. But it's also me doing due diligence as a member of council to reach out when people call me and say, hey, I want this to change because it's not right. I want this to change because I don't want to spend $15,000 every time someone disagrees with one decision a council member or mayor has. Additionally, if council believes, and I'm not putting the power back on us to do this, but council has the power to remove individual members through a vote should we feel they were egregious. Jokingly, I was almost removed because I had not seen the movie Tombstone. So I watched that movie directly after that, and did not happen again. But
Resolve that issue.
yeah, we resolved it. But if we see someone has done something illegal, I know I would pressure someone to be like, hey, you need to resign, you need to deal with this, or we can remove. But if there's not consensus there, which there's not with our mayor, I don't believe he's done anything illegal, I don't believe he's done anything egregious, then there's the petition to recall. But 8 signatures more than what I had in my election to charge $15,000 or more, because we don't know that cost yet. I think working with the authors, having them recommend something, or moving forward that way, is a correct move for our city. Because, yeah, it really hit me whenever the authors of the Home Rule said, we didn't expect it to go this way. This is not what we wanted. This is not our intent. So let's make it their intent.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, I've also heard from numerous constituents who have said, what is the deal? How is it that this took so few signatures? This isn't right. This needs to be changed. So just to clarify, it's not like this is only my personal opinion, and I haven't heard it from anybody else. I've heard it from a lot of other people. Just to add on a little bit, the problem with this is, when we're talking about needing 50, 60 signatures to recall an elected official, anyone can get that many signatures for anything, honestly. So then you just open the door to having a recall for whatever bogus reason somebody wants, or because someone has a personal vendetta. I'm not saying that that's the case in this case. This recall election's happening no matter what. That ship has already sailed, so there's no point in rehashing that. I'm just saying, is that how we want this to be in the future? Do we want someone to have a personal vendetta against someone on council, go out and get 40, 50 signatures, and boom, we have another expensive recall election on our hands? I don't want our city to be that way. I don't think most of the residents want the city to be that way. And, I don't think that elected officials should be able to be punished for the terrible voter turnout. Mr. Sanders said, well, why don't we go out and campaign and get people to vote for us? Well, we do. I campaigned really hard. Any of you who were privy to my campaign, witnessed anything in my campaign, you know what I did in my campaign. But still, only 560-some people voted for my office, and 134 for me. Well, I wish more than 134 people had voted for me, but that's not how it went down. But that's not a reflection of how hard I worked, or how hard any of the other candidates worked. There were 7 of us. So you can't, to me, that's not a fair argument to say, well, only that many people voted, so, I guess you didn't work hard enough. That's a false equivocation. We do work hard to get elected. So I'm all about, in the meantime, one of the things on my platform is to increase voter turnout and to address voter apathy. I hate it. I want us to have better voter turnout. But in the meantime, we can't let this go on like it is. It's just not right.
So I was on the Home Rule Charter Review Committee temporarily. I had to resign so I could be on city council. And I don't know if I made it to the part where this section was in there. But I do know that this would have probably been one of those that we would have breezed right over, just because we didn't feel like it was going to be an issue. So I don't know what the possibility is to have the committee reconvene or create another one, but I also don't feel like this section, for it to be changed, should be spearheaded by us, because this affects us, and I don't feel that it's right for us to say, I don't like that, we need to change it. I think it should go to a committee and have them review it, and if they feel like it does need to be changed, then that's on them. I definitely don't feel like it should be in the November election either. It's kind of what I talked about earlier.
That's too touchy.
If there is this in there, then what else was possibly missed? So it might not be a bad idea to go back and review more of it. Whether you use the same committee that was used, that was a very good group of people. I enjoyed working with them. I didn't want to have to quit that, and it seemed like I cursed council ever since I came on because COVID hit and then everything else. But I really don't feel like, I feel like it's kind of a slippery slope for us to be deciding this when it affects us.
Yeah,
I
and we
think-
can definitely reconvene the Home Rule Charter Review Committee. That wouldn't be an issue at all, and I'm sure that they'd be happy to do so. As well as it would be a good opportunity if we're going to get that committee together to revisit the municipal court sections
Yes.
of the charter as well. So there are a few things that need to be done, or at least looked at and reviewed with the charter anyway, so we can wrap that all into one, and if council and the mayor directs, we can definitely reconvene that committee.
Right. We will have to, you will have to vote on it again, because we have to approve
Yeah.
it to go on the ballot, but we can have someone else recommend what the changes should be.
We'll need an
I think that's a
I'd be
very good
okay.
point, yeah.
I'd be okay with that recommendation from them.
Yeah, I don't
Mayor
think
and
we,
council.
I don't think we can do it in normal process of order. We couldn't have it ready by then anyway, so.
We'll need to, the charter requires an ordinance to reconvene that commission, and then they have a
Okay.
one-year clock to propose amendments.
Okay.
I just wanted to make you all aware of that.
All right.
So if that's
we
the
can
direction we're
move
gonna
forward
go.
with that, and I think that'd be great.
Okay.
Yep, we'll get those names together and bring something back to council next meeting.
Anything else on that?
Not on that, sorry.
Oh. All right, we'll move on to, do we have anything else? Any questions on the reports or anything? I did, on the informational items, I did notice, Chief, the arrests are up like 100% year over year. Is that a?
I made a note of that as well.
I'm red in my notes,
Yeah.
I'm like, is that a typo, or is there some reasonable explanation for that?
So you're referring
just
to
arresting
the
people like
physical
crazy.
arrests?
Yes.
On the report? Yeah, so what you're seeing is really a change of going back to the typical way of doing business. As a result of coronavirus, we were not making physical arrests for quite some time, so we were doing a lot of charging later kind of things, booking release kind of scenarios, citing when we could. And so now that we have protocol allowing us to take people into custody and they are accepting people at the detention center, we are going back to making physical arrests. So that's why the physical arrest number has bounced back. Also, as a direct result of just being more proactive, where we were in a more reactive role prior to that.
Sounds like a very reasonable explanation.
And I will say, looking through all of that, I did notice, I mean, I was kind of writing down increase in motor vehicle accidents, increase in tickets and warnings, increase in physical arrest, doubled increase in DWIs. But one thing out of all that, I feel like as long as I'm reading this correctly, I feel like the more important thing to look at is that there's almost been a 2-minute decrease in dispatch to arrival.
Yeah, that's a direct result of changing our shift length to 12 hours. We're putting more personnel on the streets, and we have something called beat discipline, and so we're putting our officers in certain areas of the city and having them stay there in those areas. So that's driving our response time down to calls for service.
That's impressive. Thank you. And thank you, I guess.
Anything else on the informational items? Anything else from staff? Anything else from council?
Yes.
Ms. Graham?
I got an email from a gentleman He's concerned that he has heard that they are closing Norton Road. And I told him I didn't know that that was a reality, but I would find out.
I think I spoke with that gentleman and explained to him that, yeah, that part of the subdivision, or part of the realignment of Truman Boulevard is to close that little weird part that goes through the trees, yeah.
He said it's gonna cut off of the curbs and stuff, but it
Yeah,
will.
but it won't be closed until the Truman extension is
Okay, well, I
completed.
told him I'd get back, because I thought, no, it's just that little.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the connection, you can still make the connection to Truman from, the street by the Nixa Hardware, going through that
West?
subdivision, yeah.
Yeah, you can go through that subdivision.
So that it's not taking away access
You just have to
from,
wind around this way.
yeah, you just have to change your route
Yeah.
slightly.
Doug,
and
you
then
could just
make
ask
that
me,
connection
Mike.
with Truman.
Well, I was pretty sure that was misinformation. I wanted to make.
Yeah, I had several people, for whatever reason, when they started doing construction on that subdivision, people thought they were just gonna close the road immediately, and so, maybe that's, I don't know, probably not something we can put, I don't know how we would put that out, but yeah.
Yeah,
Just some
I did want to
misinformation.
bring that up, because I talked to him, I provided him with the Ozarks Transportation Organization major thoroughfare plan maps, and so he saw that there'd eventually be a connection from Pembroke to Wasson and other things like that. We did talk about Norton, a section of Norton being closed, but he can still get to South Street by going up Truman once it's constructed and going out, so he was okay with that. I was gonna say something else, and I lost my train of thought. I did want to bring up, whenever we do go forward with this, probably talking about, or working with the contractor for phased closures of the roadway, so that all of what is Norton right now isn't closed, and so they can't get out. So, with Pembroke, they'd have access to maybe Rosedale to get out and do other things like that, so they don't have to go through two school zones.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and we will do that. That's one of the things we try to do ahead of the pre-construction conference with the contractor. We try to let the contractor think through that when they're bidding, which if they can do it their way, it certainly helps with the pricing. However, they realize that, we're not just going, you can't just go in there and close the whole road for 4 months while you're building a roadway. So, but thank you. We'll pay attention to that.
Okay.
And I'd also spoke to Mr. Lyles about the burning. I don't know if either of you got complaints about the burning. They're burning off the field. And they're the entire,
Oh, gotcha.
I think the wind must have been going away from your house and towards my house. Anything else?
I wanted to bring up the idea that, given what's happening right now in our area with the Delta variant and how dire things are becoming, I'm thinking maybe it would be a good idea to have, at an upcoming council meeting, a briefing from the health department again, because things are as bad as / worse than they ever have been, so.
Sure, we can reach out. We can reach out to the Christian County Health Department and some of the local health officials as well. We have a few contacts there, so we can see if someone would be willing to come present to council.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? All right, motion to adjourn.
So made.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all very much.